this is Max. Welcome back to another Microsoft Flight Simulator video. I am here taking off from the Arusha airport. This is in Tanzania, Africa. And I'm going to fly this plane over to Mount Kilimanjaro, which is one of the tallest mountains in Africa. It's home of two volcanoes, and it's a well-known climbing destination. I don't anticipate that this particular mountain will have extreme amount of detail. It's not like Mount Fuji or even Mount St. Helen with a very distinct volcanic crater, but it should be interesting to see if we can see similar angles as I've seen in photographs on the internet of Mount Kilimanjaro as I fly towards it. However, I am taking off from pretty far away. This is, again, Arusha is west of Mount Kilimanjaro, and it takes a little while to actually fly the distance between the two. So we're going to skip some of the boring flight sessions and get you to the mountain as quickly as reasonably possible. But before we get that far, one of the first things I'll be doing is passing by Mount Meru, which is part of the Arusha National Park. That is the first mountain you kind of see when you turn towards the direction of Mount Kilimanjaro. And here is the Mount Meru. I'm going to be passing by this mountain, and then we're going to be able to get a view of Kilimanjaro at that point. So as you can see in the distance, you can already get the a little bit of a view of Mount Kilimanjaro, but again, the flight takes a while. Here from inside the plane we can finally see Mount Kilimanjaro in the distance. This part of the flight is another almost 15-20 minutes, even at the speed I'm going, to get closer to actually see the mountain. But it's a beautiful view. I actually picked early morning so I can get like a little bit of the sun in your eyes as you fly through kind of feel. I don't think it took a lot away from the actual visuals. If anything, it enhanced it. But as you get closer to the mountain, you can see the two distinct volcanoes. They have the two peaks. One is the one that is coming up. It's actually the more noticeable crater, and the other little peak in the distance is actually a secondary volcano crater. They're both named, but I actually don't remember what their names are. What we're going to focus on is the fly-by of the main crater because it is visually more imposing, and I don't think you'll see a lot of detail on the smaller crater in the distance. So here we're starting to approach it, and you can see the digitization of the crater is such that this crater, and even from aerial photos I've seen, isn't as deep and as visible from the air as, say, the one for Mount Fuji or the Mount St. Helen. It almost looks shallow in the way it's presented in the visualization of the game. But it is still an impressive mountain. From the air, because the way the mountain spreads out, it doesn't have that feel of a tall, sharp mountain that Mount Fuji had. So the visual isn't as distinctive when you're flying over it in an airplane. What's actually more interesting is when you take a turnaround and try to slowly go back to a lower altitude and reapproach the mountain from that angle, because you get more of the feel of how, many of the photos of Mount Kilimanjaro, when you see it on the internet, has this massive sized mountain. It's almost like a big shadow sitting against the skyline. In this particular flight angle, I don't see that. I tend to only see what looks like a kind of, it's not even all that sharply contrasted volcanic look. It doesn't even look that much like a volcano. It almost looked like a mountain with some dimples in it. So it didn't give me that impressiveness of the mountain when I'm up at 30,000 feet looking down at it. So what I thought is that a better way to potentially view this is perhaps taking a dive back down to a lower altitude and then reapproach the mountain from an angle where we can get the full majesty of its size. Because this is not a sharply rising mountain, and therefore the aerial view doesn't give you the same feel. So here you can see I've reapproached it. I'm actually dropping down to almost 20,000 feet. Now you can actually see the entire Mount Kilimanjaro here with both volcanic peaks, although I am really approaching the bigger one from the side. But you can get a better feel for its overall size against the skyline when you're flying in from a lower altitude versus coming in from a high altitude where it just looks a little bit like a massively spread out mountain but kind of flat. From this altitude you can see how it rises above the African plains and really peaks out at a pretty impressive height. You have to think I had to fly almost 30,000 feet to have an aerial downward view of this mountain. This is not a small mountain. It's actually a really massive mountain that rises over the African plains. And this is, again, the tallest mountain in Africa. And from this angle, you can get a better feel of the size of it and how it rises ultimately to the volcanic peak. And again, we can see the secondary volcano also from here. So it is still a very impressive mountain, and I can see why people would make the trek to go climb this and try to, go to the summit of the volcano to see and kind of gaze over the plains of Africa. It is still a very impressive structure. However, that being said, it doesn't seem to be as well represented in the simulator view as, say, when I flew to Mount Fuji and Mount St. Helen, which had a even better digitized feel. I wouldn't necessarily say fully realistic feel, but a more impressive and little more realism. So while I'm not disappointed from this by any means, I did enjoy this flight, and I certainly enjoyed looking at and approaching the mountain and then flying away from it, getting various angle of it. This particular mountain just didn't have the same level of imposingness within the game as, say, the other mountains that I've already flown to. But let's not take away from the fact this is still a very impressive site to fly out to from the airport all the way to the mountain, flying around the mountain, and ultimately as you leave and fly away from the mountain. So that was my quick flight around Mount Kilimanjaro, and I was quite impressed with the way this game overall digitized and represent these mountains. And sometimes it takes different altitudes to get really a feel for just how nice the game is able to represent them. I have never been to this mountain. I've never even seen it outside of pictures. So the idea of actually flying over this, I really enjoy the flight. I enjoy the various views. Let me know what you think of Mount Kilimanjaro as represented by Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you have any places you would like me to fly to, I would be happy to do it and also record the experience. And once again, thank you for joining me in another flight in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'll catch you again next time.